me, but I know many of you are. How many of you, raise of hands, are competitive, very competitive? If there's somebody sitting next to you that's really competitive and they're not putting your hand, you can put their hand up too. You know, being competitive is not a bad thing, but sometimes it could be a bad thing, right? I can't tell you all the stories, but I've had quite a few stories in our household where there have been family fights over playing Monopoly. Because I think in the last one that happened, my cousin took out real money and bargained Grant to allow him to pass by so many times if you would give him $10. So we're a little competitive in our household. I went over to, with some friends a couple weeks ago, I was playing board games. And one game they introduced to me recently, it's been around for a long time, but it's this game of Risk. It's a strategy game. There's countries and there's little troops and stuff. And it's a bad thing when you're playing with a bunch of guys and you don't know the rules and they say, well, just come along, you'll learn the rules as we play. And I'm like, well, do you guys have no, just we'll tell you them as we play. And so I kept losing and losing and losing, and we played this game a couple times, I kept losing. And so my competitive nature goes, okay, next time I'm going to win. So I go home that next day and I'm studying, like, what are the strategies for Risk and how do you win and what are the probabilities? And I'm writing down numbers, taking pictures of my phone. So next time I can be prepared to win. You know, we see it in sports events all the time. You watch different sports events, a different fighter who's fighting. And the odds are that one guy is going to just crush the other guy in a boxing or an MMA match. And it ends up being the guy who is going to win the fight loses to the underdog. And you see it and they say, well, I'm going to study why I lost. I want to know why I took the loss there. There's championship matches like the Super Bowl where, man, the Patriots look like they're going to lose and they come out of nowhere. And they come back from a huge deficit. And the other team, they win the Super Bowl, and the other team's sitting there like, how in the world did we lose that match? People look over footage to try to answer this question, why did we lose? You know, far too often in life, what I've realized is sometimes we're in a season of losing, and we don't ask ourselves the question, why? Maybe you're in a season right now where you feel like you're in a losing season right now. You feel like out of all the things in your life that could go wrong, it seems like all of them are going wrong. And you're in a season trying to ask yourself, like, why are so many things going wrong in my life? Why does it seem like I'm off? Like, why does it seem like my relationships are going bad and it seems like things at work are going bad? And it just feels like I'm losing. It feels like I was in a good season and now I'm in a different season. It feels like I'm in a season of losing. You ever feel like that? Man, I'm in a tough season right now and I feel like I'm losing and I should be winning in this season. Following Jesus doesn't always mean that we don't have suffering, right? Amen to that. It doesn't mean that we never have any trials. It doesn't mean that we never have any hardships. It doesn't mean that you never get sick. But sometimes we're losing battles that we really shouldn't be losing. We should really be winning. And so I want to preface all this by saying that I do believe some things in life happen. Some things just happen. I want to also preface it by saying that not every time your car breaks down is God trying to say something to you. There was one speaker before, he was saying, I was sitting outside in my window and I was having a cup of coffee and I was looking at this little bird and I was like, wow, God, you created those birds. That's amazing. And he said, then a hawk came and just grabbed the bird and killed it and ran off. And he's like, I don't know, God, what were you trying to say to me there? What were you? It's like not every time you see a dead animal on the road is God trying to speak to you, or not every time the car breaks down is God trying, not every time you get the flu, did you sin or do something wrong? But there is some times where really you should be in a season of success and victory and blessing, but because you're living in a certain way, you're really not experiencing the life that you should be experiencing in Christ, like you should be experiencing. You're really boxing yourself off from what God wants from you. And so there's a passage today that we're going to jump into in Joshua chapter 7. And really this passage is that. This is a passage about the people of Israel, the people of God, who were supposed to be experiencing all victory, all winning, all blessing, all success. And yet because of the way they lived, a battle that they were supposed to win, they ended up losing. And so I think there's a lot of practical lessons for us to learn this morning. If you feel like, wow, I feel like God's withholding his hand from me, I want to dive into this a little bit and see if God speaks to us this morning, okay? Joshua chapter 7, verse 1. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, imagine naming your kids those, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth Aven to the east of Bethel, and told them, go up and spy out the region. So the men went up and they spied out Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, not all the army will even have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for only a few people live there. Hashtag easy win. Listen, if you're looking in your Bible, you're not going to find that. So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gates as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted and in fear and became like water. So if you've been with us over the last couple weeks or you haven't, I'm going to recap you really quick. But we've been going through the book of Joshua. And in the beginning of Joshua, the beginning of the book, Moses, the great leader who, man, God used in such a powerful way, dies. Dies of old age, and he moves on. And Joshua now becomes the leader of this nation of Israel, which is from anywhere from 1 million to 2 million people at this point. Joshua is filling big shoes, but he says, God, listen, if you're with me, God, I'm going to tackle whatever you have in front of me. And God tells Joshua, hey, listen, anywhere you put your foot, anything you do, I'm going to give you the victory on a platter. You don't have to worry about it. You're not fighting your conquest, you're fighting my conquest. I mean, that'd be amazing to hear, right? God's like, you're not just fighting some battle over there. That's my battle you're fighting, and I'm going to win it for you. So Joshua goes into this next season. They were on this side of the Jordan, the promised land that was in front of them. The thing that separated them was this Jordan River. And so another sign of the hand of God was with them. They went, the priest stepped in the water. The water was stopped miraculously by the hand of God. 1 million to 2 million people, the Israelites, crossed over to the promised land. And last week we talked about their first major battle in the promised land, the Battle of Jericho. They show up to this fortress. God gives them this really super unorthodox way to win a battle. He says, listen, you're going to go around this fortress, you're going to worship, you're going to play the trumpets, and the walls of this fortress of Jericho are going to fall down, and I'm going to give you a victory, another victory on a platter. They march around, blow the trumpets, the walls fall down, and the Israelites conquer their first major fortress in the new land, the promised land that they're called to. And so chapter 7 follows up right after that. But there's a switching point in chapter 7, and we see it from the very first word in the passage. In verse 1, the first word of this whole chapter is, but. Victory, victory, victory. Feel like that in your life sometimes? Like, man, God, you are blessing me in this area, my relationships. Like, I'm experiencing new blessing in my business and new blessing in this area and my health. And wow, God, you have been so good. And then chapter 7 starts off, but, hey, how many of us know that after the greatest victory, or after some great victories in our life, sometimes the darkest, most challenging season comes right after that? Like, hey, just because you've experienced the hand of God in a way that whoa, God, I never thought you would do that in my child, but they've turned around and they've come to me. Wow, I never thought you would do that in my finances. Wow, I never thought you would break me free of those lies that shackled me. Wow, God, you are powerful. You're good, but don't put your guard down. Because sometimes right in the greatest season of victory, right after that comes the greatest season of challenge. Look at Jesus himself. Jesus gets baptized. God says from heaven, this is my servant, y'all. Listen up. This is the one. And then right after that, what happens? He gets led into the wilderness to get tempted by Satan. So if you're experiencing a season right now of blessing, let me just encourage you, be on alert. Because there may be a season of challenge coming right after that. And that's what these guys experienced. God had told them in verse 1 we see here, but the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. And then it says this guy Achan, who first time we get his name, Achan took some of the devoted things. Now we hear first about the devoted things in chapter 6, but if you're like me, I'm like, I don't use the word devoted things. Like, what does that mean? Well, after they conquered Jericho, basically God said this, listen, Jericho is the first fruits of the new land. So just like we give the first fruits of our money, he's saying, listen, I'm going to give you all the promised land. Yeah, there's armies. Yeah, there's fortresses, but I'm going to win. I'm going to win all those battles and give them to you. But hey, this first battle of Jericho, the one where I knocked down the walls, you need to make sure that you give me everything that's in that city to me. They were supposed to put it into the treasury. God says, listen, after that city, all of it's yours. Take the gold, take the silver, take the iron, but in that first city, do not touch what's there. That is mine. That's a first fruits offering. They knew this. All the people knew this, and they knew the consequences. And in chapter 6, you hear the consequences. Whoever would take it would face destruction. And yet still Achan, without anybody knowing, didn't take all of it, but he took a portion of the devoted things that were supposed to be given to God. He took what was rightfully God's. You know, I think of Achan, and I look at my own life sometimes, and as I'm reading these passages, before I ever feel like I can preach to you, I feel like I need to preach to myself first. Before I ever feel like I can come up in here and teach, I feel like God needs to teach me something from the word first. I don't feel like I'm ever ready to preach and to teach until I feel like God has made his deposit inside my heart and spirit before I ever make a deposit inside you. And I feel like one of the deposits that I felt like God made this week is the same thing that Achan wrestled with. Achan knew that God only wanted the first fruits of Jericho, and all the rest of the cities would have been his. But you know what I think Achan wrestled with? I think Achan wrestled with compromise because he was impatient. See, how many times do we do that, right? Because in my mind, I go, oh, God, I would never touch what's yours. I would have walked right by that gold and said, that's God's right there. I'm not touching that. Like, it's God's. Like, no way am I going to touch that. But yet I'm so quick to say with my time, oh, God, this is my time. Oh, God, I would never. Achan, whoa, not me, God. Achan touching the gold, but how quick are we to say it's my body? You know, you don't just get, when you're a believer, you don't just step foot into a club. The Bible says you were bought at a price. You were purchased with the blood of Jesus. And so you being a Christian and me being a Christian doesn't mean it's just my life. Hey, it's not my life anymore. My life, I live for God. I've given the keys and the responsibility and the ownership. Being a Christian doesn't mean, hey, I just come to church on Sunday. Being a Christian means I have given the rights to my life over to God for him to do what he wants, for him to command me, for him to show me the way, give me the will of what he wants me to do with the life that he's given me. Hey, God, what little portion do you want of my money? No. God, what can I give back to you of yours that's already yours? See, there's things in our life that we try to take ownership of, but God already has ownership of it. And so we're trying to hold on to something that's already devoted to God. If you're still trying to hold on to your life as a Christian and what you do and your plans and say, God, I'll consult you once I've figured out my life, you're still trying to hold on to something that's devoted to God. Your life, your being, everything that you are as a Christian is devoted to God. That's the devoted things. They were clearly commanded not to touch the devoted things. And I got to think in Achan's mind, he wrestles with the same thing we do many times, is he's impatient. He knows that in the next city, they're going to get the gold and the silver, and he could take a portion of that. But I know Achan's wrestling with the same thing many of us wrestle with. We're looking at the watch saying, God, I was supposed to be married by now. You're a little bit behind. God, I was supposed to have that business and that success or be where I want to be in my career. God, I'm looking, you're running a little bit late, God. I'm not where I want to be. God, I'm supposed to be done with those problems and on those issues that I'm wrestling with. Why am I? You're behind schedule, God. You're running a little late. See, a lot of times what I find is that I wrestle with short-sightedness, right? I don't always see the big picture plan that God does. And so I wrestle with the short-sightedness. And many times I wrestle with comparison. And so when we are in the age, not only the age of information, but we're in the age of comparison. But we have constant access to everything that everybody doing around us, and we show the highlights of our life online, and it's so easy to compare to what other people are doing, but your story's your own. And so often we get caught up in this vicious vortex and circle of comparison. You go, well, why am I not in a relationship? Why don't I drive that type of car? Why don't I have that type of house? And we go, God, you're running behind schedule. God, you're supposed to do some of this. I'm sure that's what a little bit what Achan wrestled with. Achan's like, wow, God, I'm glad it's going to come in the future. But what about right now, God? Where's my portion right now? Hey, we do this with sin, right? When we compromise, we do it a little bit with sin. We kind of belittle that our actions that like, well, I worked for it, God. Right? Achan's like, listen, God, I fought the battle. I went in there with my sword and my shield. I was the one who marched around like I deserve my portion. Hey, God, I've been faithful in going on Sunday. I go to small group. I do this. God, I deserve. God, I deserve for you to give me what I want. See, one of the things that's most hard for us in not being able to see the future is we wrestle with when we don't get what we want in the season that we want it. Hey, there's some things that hindsight, you look back a little bit and you say, wow, I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't ready enough. God, I am so happy you didn't answer my prayer and you gave me it, not when I wanted, but you gave me when I needed it, God. I'm glad you didn't rush things, God. I'm glad you didn't rush that person. I'm glad you didn't rush that opportunity, rush that job, because you knew better than I would, God. If you would have gave it to me early, I would have ruined it, God. If you would have gave it to me when I wanted it, I wouldn't have been prepared. But thank God, you gave it to me when you wanted to give it to me in my life. So Joshua sends spies into this land. And the spies are like, easy victory, we got this. Probably taking photos on Instagram like, wow, we got this, easy victory. Let's Snapchat this, let's post this for all our friends. We got this. Don't even send all the troops, just send 2,000 or 3,000. Easy. Easy victory in verse 4. It says, man, this is simple. Only a few people live there is what they say in verse 4. Only a few people. It's nothing like Jericho. And yet they get beaten and they lose 36 lives. 36 fathers of families lost, gone. 36 men, dead. And they're chased all the way back, and it ends in verse 5. It says, people's hearts are melting with fear. You know what? I'm sure that the Israelites didn't want this in their life, but sometimes the greatest lessons are learned in that season of loss. Right? I'm sure they weren't praying, God, would you let us lose so that we can learn an important lesson? I don't meet a lot of people, hey, let's huddle together in prayer and like, God, let us go through the hardest trial we've ever gone through, God. I want it to be fire and brimstone. I want it to be challenging. I want you to really, really rip me apart and then build me back up together, God. I don't know a lot of people that really want a really difficult, tough season in their life. But God works in those difficult, tough seasons. And sometimes in our loss, in our mistakes, we learn the greatest lesson that we need to learn to help us grow and be more like Christ. Verse 6. Then Joshua, he hears the news, right? Tears his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, right? He's most likely not right in front of the ark, but he's aiming in the direction, saying, God, I'm praying to you. I'm praying to your presence. Remaining there till evening. So he's there all day, praying before God. Why did this happen? What's going on? The elders of Israel did the same, and they sprinkled dust on their heads. It's a symbol of humility, lowering themselves. And Joshua said, alas, sovereign Lord, this is his prayer. Sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring the people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and all the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your great name? Joshua's confused. He's confused. He sees the victory, God's with us. You're going to take everything in the promise. It's yours. And then he's left with a defeat in his hands, and he doesn't understand it. He's confused. Like, what changed, God? Did you change the plan? Because we had victory, and now I'm in a loss, and I don't get it. Hey, let me ask you a question. When you're in a season like that, and you feel like it's a victory, and you experience a tragedy or a loss or something that's so difficult in your life, what do you turn to for answers? See, a lot of times what I see and what I've done is a lot of times I try to get all the answers and then I try to bring it to God. But you know what I love about Joshua? This is Joshua fell on his face. It says the elders did the same. They didn't wait to have an answer and then bring that answer to God. They went to God for the answer. See, I think that's one of the most profound differences in our life. I'm not saying there's not good advice and good principles and good books out there to read, but there is no truth and there is no answer like the answer that comes from God. And so when we go through this season where we're like Joshua, like, God, what's going on? And why is this happening? Your job is not to try to figure out the answer and then bring it to God and say, hey, God, now can you solve this? Your job is to go to God for the answer and then say, God, I need you to do what you got to do. I love Joshua. He has humility in his prayer. He's wrestling through it. I mean, you could hear his fear in it. He's wrestling through this. And many times, our last resort is that we go to God in prayer. It's not even our first response. It's like the last thing we do. Like, God, let me check with my mastermind group and see what they think about why my marriage is falling apart. And then let me read this book on marriage. And then let me read this article and watch this YouTube video and Google why marriage is falling apart. And then I'm going to go to you. We do all this run around work. God, what's the answer, God? What is it, God? Let me check this. And God's like, listen, you could have just got down on your knees and I would have helped you. What is the answer? I'm just trying to figure it out. And God's like, listen, all you had to do was get down on your knees. Why are you going to all these other sources when you can go directly to me? I think our first response when we there's times in our life where you'll experience tragedy, and a lot of you have, and some of you are in right now, where you'll experience something you don't understand why it's happening to you, and your job is to go on your knees before God and say, God, I don't understand this, but I trust you. God, help me, strengthen me in this season. Be with me in this season. God, I need you. He needs to be our first response, not our last resort. Not the thing we turn to after everything we figured it out and now I think I know what I'm going through. No, go to God first and say, God, you are my first place that I go to. You are my comfort and my refuge. You're my stronghold. You are my everything, God. Joshua and the leadership, man, they turned to prayer to seek out their answer. And it's their first response. Joshua tears his clothes. He doesn't just pray for a couple minutes. This guy's on his knees, praying for hours with the leadership, saying, God, help us, guide us, let us get through this, give us an answer, give us direction, God. Let us understand why we're going through what we're going through. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't know that Achan's sin. He just sees that there's loss, there's win, and then there's this big loss of an insignificant small battle they shouldn't have lost. You know what else strikes me, though? Is when you look at what Joshua says, Joshua's default is to think that God is wrong. Think about it. Joshua's response is to blame God. Listen to what he says. Oh, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan River? And then to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites? Like, he's like, God, why'd you do this? Why'd you push us to cross the water and be delivered to our enemies? How do we say it? God, why would you let me go through this? God, why am I experiencing this? God, why would you do this to me? Right? He says, if only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. How do we say that? God, if I just wouldn't have been following you so strongly, if I wouldn't have just wanted to make such an impact, then I wouldn't have been experienced. If I wouldn't have taken that position of leadership, God, I would have never had to go through what I'm going through right now. And we try to kind of backpedal on what God's doing in our life. He says, oh Lord, what can I say now? Verse 8, that Israel has been routed by its enemies. God, what does this say about my testimony? You ever had somebody say, oh, you're a Christian, well, why are you going through this now? God, what about the people that say that to me? What am I going to do? What's my response? I'm going through something bad now. They're going to think that I'm not a Christian. I'm not right. And the last one, he says, the Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. It's fear. Like, God, you must not be for us, and we're going to be done. Everything that you've done is going to get unraveled. Like, how quick was Joshua to blame God and say, God, what do you must not know what you're doing up there. What's going on? Everything seems to be falling apart. See, when you go through the loss, not when you go through the victory, not when you're on the mountaintop, but when you go through the loss is when your faith is really tested. When you go through the loss, tell me what your prayer life is like. What are the words you're saying to God? Are you in other ways saying, God, you really don't know, and why would you do this, and why would you lead me? Or are you saying, God, help me understand? Because sometimes our default is to say, God, hey, let me say one more thing. Sometimes we blame God for the product of our own circumstances and actions. God, I don't get it. I was drinking a little bit, and then I was driving, and I got a DUI. How could you do that to me? Thought you were good, and you're merciful, and now I got a DUI, and I'm going to spend some time in jail. God, what happened? I was going to church. I was listening to some of the things the pastor was saying. I even put a little bit of money in, God. And you gave me a DUI, huh? This is what, so I guess going to church. I guess that's what it leads to, DUI, huh? Okay. Thought you were supposed to have my back. And so we kind of play this game with God like, hey, God, how could God give me a DUI? And God's like, listen, you gave yourself the DUI because you chose to live in your own way and take your own actions and do your own thing. You didn't follow my way. That's not from my hand. That's from your hand. God, my marriage is falling apart. I'm on the brink of divorce. How could you do this? I got married. You told me, I was faithful, and you told me, but God's like, well, didn't she offer you counseling 6 or 7 times? And didn't she want to work at it? And you're like, no, I don't have enough time. The business is growing. And then she put a lot of effort, and you weren't the one, and now you're on the brink of divorce, and you're trying to say, God, why did you bring divorce into my lap? God, why do I feel so cold? I don't worship like I used to worship. I don't feel your presence like I don't have a desire to get in the Word. Why do I feel so distant and so cold from you, God? Are you not there? Why did you lead me to feel this way? And why is this happening? God's like, well, listen, there's got to be some discipline in there. Getting in the Word, praying, being in fellowship, keeping the fire strong, because if not, it goes out. So don't blame here. One of the things that happens a lot in our culture, and I talk to a lot of Christians about this, and I really challenge believers on this, because a lot of times we put the responsibility for our spiritual condition in somebody else's hands. And God is saying, listen, none of us will be able to stand before the throne of God and say, God, I was backslidden for 10 years because I didn't enjoy the message, or this brother offended me. You stand before God one day. You are the only one responsible for your spiritual condition and your spiritual health and your spiritual fervor. Nobody else. Nobody else. You can't one day say, well, God, if I would have just enjoyed the small group study a little bit more, I would have been more on fire. That is your responsibility to be on fire with God, not your small group leader. God, I wish I was, doing more work for your kingdom, but I just need somebody to ask me. No. That's your job. That's your responsibility. If you feel lukewarm and cold and distant from God, that's not your small group leader, your pastors, or your brother next door. That is your responsibility to make sure that your walk with Jesus is strong and fervent and more exciting and powerful than it was in the last season. It's like trying to blame your marriage, like, God, my marriage isn't where it needs to be, but it's my neighbor's fault. God, my marriage isn't where it needs to be, but it's that pastor's fault. My small group leader's fault. My cousin's fault. No, your marriage is your responsibility. That's a relationship that you have the ownership and responsibility to honor God and to keep the fire hot. In times of trouble, we are often very quick to blame God, and what we're very slow to do is remember the faithfulness. In the season where it's difficult and it's tough, really challenging, one of the most powerful things we can do is not only go to prayer quickly, go to God in prayer quickly, but one of the most powerful things you and I can do is remember the faithfulness of God. Sometimes what I do on a personal note is sometimes when I pray a lot, I spend a lot of time thanking God. I use the formula of the Our Father prayer. I acknowledge who he is. I acknowledge his kingdom, his will, his plans all before mine. And then I take a little minute to do an exhaustive list in my head when I'm praying. I say, God, thank you for the car. Thank you for fresh water. Thank you, I can even take a shower. Thank you, Father, I was able to order a book. Father, thank you that I'm able to be in a nation. Father, thank you for the church. I start going through people. Thank you for this brother and this sister. Thank you for this person. Thank you for godly leadership. God, thank you for stewardship. Thank you for being able to pay the bills. I just go through a list and boom, 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 boom. You know why that's so important in the middle of when you feel like you're surrounded by the storm? Because you need to remember how faithful and how good has been. God has not changed just because your circumstances have. And so when you know that and your starting position is that God is still good, God doesn't change, God is faithful to his promises, then it allows you to keep walking. Even though your circumstances might change, you know that God does not change. God does not change. Listen to the Lord's response to Joshua. Joshua's kind of whining in his prayers a little bit. And this is the Lord's response. The Lord said to Joshua in verse 10, stand up. You almost hear like, mijo, get up. What are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. A couple weeks ago, I was in my house, and I was the only one at the house at that time, and I was doing some studying. And I don't know if you hate this as much as me, but like little noises, like even like the window open and like the shade keeps hitting it, it's like really bothers me. But the ultimate like annoying noise is for sure when the fire alarm is out of batteries. I'm pretty sure that's going to be playing in hell like just 24/7, like that little beep, beep. It's like, that's straight torture. It drives me insane. So I'm studying, I'm doing my work, and I hear it go, beep, and it waits. You don't even know if it's there the first time. You're like, was it? Okay, I'm hearing things like, beep. Why didn't they change this? Okay. I go over to the fire alarm, and I'm saying, I hear, beep. I was like, okay, maybe it just needs to hold down the button. And there's only one button. They're simple. But you overthink it, right? Maybe you got to hold it down. Maybe you got to click it 3 times. Maybe it's like a 5-click combo. I don't know. So I'm trying to figure this thing out, and I'm trying, and then it dawns on me, like, this is probably what happens when the battery's dead. And so I open it up, I pull the battery out, I go downstairs, we have 1 battery left. It's like, Lord, you are good. You are good. It's the little things, right? I go down, and I bring it back up, and I put the battery in, and once again, I don't know. I've never done this, so I like click it a couple times, and it goes, and then it like goes back to its regular pattern. It's got this little like reprogramming setting. And I'm like, okay, it's done. And it goes beep. Okay. Come back to it again. And I'm like, maybe I have to hold it for so many seconds, or maybe, and I'm trying out multiple different things. Did I put the battery in the right way? Yeah, I did. I was like, what is this? Why is it making the sound? Now I'm at a point, 20 minutes later, I'm at a point where I'm Googling video, I'm YouTubing videos, Googling, like, I'm becoming a master expert on how long you're supposed to hold it in this. And I do everything that I'm supposed to do. Everything. I mean, I check off the list. This thing should be just quiet. Pray over it. I mean, everything. Getting desperate. And it's still, I walk away for the final time. I'm like, this has to be it. I tried every combo. That's what I did. And it beep. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to put my headphones on, and I'll just act like I never heard it, and somebody else will do it. So I put my headphones on. I start doing this study, and then I have to go to the bathroom. I take my headphones off. I go to the bathroom, and about halfway there, I hear the beep, and it dawns on me. There's 2 fire alarms in the same hallway. Now, I share that story because we're family, and I know you're not going to tell anyone, right? I'm just kidding. It goes off that second time, and I stand in between both of them, and I hear it again. And I'm like, I was putting it in the battery, in the one that was charged battery, good. I switched the battery out, and it clicked button 10 times, and it works. And I'm walking back to my office, and it kind of dawns on me. You know when God just like, you ever have that, just like God out of nowhere, he just teach you a little lesson? It's like you're just driving or something, and you do something, and God just teach you a little lesson. God was just teaching me real quick. He's like, hey, Josiah, sometimes you think the problem is in one place, and you spend all your time and your energy trying to work on it because you think this is the problem, and the problem is really something completely different. I was thinking, wow, that's good, God. You're really right. Because a lot of times I spend my time thinking, wow, this is the problem. I got to work on it. I got to change it. I got to do something. I got to fix it. I got to solve it. And God's like, listen, you're at the wrong area working on the wrong problem. The problem is inside your heart. And I'm working hard. Like, it's just, I got to put more time into the relationship. I got to put more time into the work. I got to put more time into this stuff. And God's like, you're those are the signals of really where the real problem is at. You need to follow the sound to where the real problem is at. I'm just using that stuff to bring to your mind and bring to your heart that really there's a greater area to deal with. But really the area you need to deal with is there's some type of compromise in your life that is really causing the problem that's over there. And I'm allowing you to understand. Hey, how many of us need a little wake-up call every once in a while? Like, we wouldn't change anything unless we had that wake-up call. Like, wow, God, why is this happening? And then you start thinking, wow, maybe God is trying to show me something. God, why is my marriage falling apart? God, why am I failing out of school? God, why is this happening? Maybe, just maybe, God is trying to teach you something in the middle of that, and he's using a problem to get your attention, but really the problem is inside your heart. See, Achan's issue was Achan compromised. Achan compromised in an area of his life. And I love God because, God is saying in verse 10, he's saying, Joshua, get up. Stop whining. Stop complaining. It's time to deal with the problem. It's probably a bad thing when God is telling you to stop praying, right? Hey, one of the most important things I think we can understand, and I think it's powerful, is that God says pray. And the Bible talks about praying without ceasing. But over and over, I see in the Bible that it's not simply about praying, it's about taking action as well. You could pray, God, give me a job. Give me a job, God. Please bless me with a good job that's good paying. I can support my family. And God, give me a job. And God's saying, okay, but would you apply for some jobs? It's like, God, would you drop a job out of the sky, just out of nowhere, God, just have somebody come to my house, and hey, guess what? He can do it. But over and over and over again, what I see in the New Testament is Jesus is walking around and people are like, hey, Jesus, would you heal me? Hey, Jesus, would you fix my problem? Hey, Jesus, would you do something? And almost every single time Jesus says, hey, I could do it, but guess what? I'm going to have you take an action step, and I'm going to work in your action step of faith. Jesus, would you heal me? Yeah, would you go bathe yourself in the water in the Jordan River 7 times? Does the water heal him? No, but the step of faith does. Sometimes we need to hear this word from God, and you're praying. I mean, sometimes we don't even need to pray about it, right? I mean, God, do I need to forgive my uncle? Do I need to forgive my wife? Hey, listen, I could stop you right there. Yeah, you do. Stop praying about it. We're praying, God, what do I need to do in this situation? God, what do I need to do? God's like, listen, you know what to do. I told you already in the word what to do. You heard on Sunday what to do. It's really clear in your heart. You know what to do. You're just pushing. You're using prayer as an excuse not to take action. Oh, no, God, I'm praying. God's like, hey, would you stop praying and take some action on the prayers you're praying? See, prayer is powerful. James says the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. I believe in prayer, but I also believe in prayer hand in hand with steps of action and steps of faith. Where you're praying for things. God, I pray you'd use me in a powerful way, and then you're going out and sharing your faith. You're going out and leading a small group. Don't just pray, God, use me. Say, pray, God, use me, and then get involved in ministry. See, God works through our steps of action and faith when we move in action and faith hand in hand with prayer. It strikes me when I look at this passage that in verse 11, when God finally shows Joshua the problem, he doesn't say Achan, right? I mean, Achan's the guy who broke the law. He broke the covenant. What's he say? Verse 11, Israel has sinned. They have violated. They have taken. They have stolen. They have lied. They have brought into their own possessions. Think about that. That when God is addressing their sin, it's not just the sin of Achan. Because Achan is a part of the community of Israel, it's as if all of Israel has sinned. The covenant wasn't just made with the leader of Israel. The covenant was made with all of Israel. And so it's a powerful lesson for us to understand that how you live and the sin that we do affects those that live around us. One of the lies that I hear played out, and tell me if you've heard this, tell me if you've used this, that sometimes it's not hurting anybody. It's not effect. Nobody knows. It's not hurting anybody. It's just something I do on the side, and it gives me a little release. It gives me a little pause, gives me a little break, but it's not hurting anybody. They don't even know about it. Hey, just because people don't know about it, just because you don't think it's not hurting anybody, doesn't mean it's not. Achan, when he's going to take the gold and the silver, he's not thinking about the impact on Israel. He's not thinking about the impact on his family. He's not even thinking about simply the impact on his own life. He is selfishly taking for himself, not even thinking of the consequences. This is mine. This is what I want. Not knowing that his sin would lead to the death of 36 of his comrades. It's just a little bit of the portion. Who's it gonna hurt? Nobody knows. And it led to the death of 36 people. See, even in that time where nobody else knew about it, think about it, it still had an effect upon the people of Israel. Even though nobody knew, everyone was walking, Joshua, none of the other people knew, but guess who knew? God knew. And so there was still a repercussion, still a consequence for the way that he lived, because you say, well, nobody knows. God knows. Well, nobody knows about what I'm doing on the side of my marriage. God does. Well, nobody knows if I fudge a little bit on the taxes. I mean, it's language. God does. And your relationship is with God before it's ever with somebody else. That's your number one priority relationship, is your relationship with God. Jesus says it in the New Testament very clearly. If you don't love me more than your brother, your mother, your sister, Jesus is saying, if you don't love me more than your most valuable, precious, important people relationships, then you're not worthy to follow me. See, our number one relationship, the relationship we should be most concerned about, the number one most important relationship is our relationship with God. So even if nobody else knows what you're doing, God does. And it affects your relationship with him. See, Achan's sin affected the whole community based on one man's actions. I don't know if Jesse's here right now, but I was talking to Jesse. Many of you guys know him. He has 2 grandchildren. He was going into McDonald's a couple months back. And there was a homeless guy sitting by the front door. He was asking, hey, can I get some money to get a sandwich? And Jesse goes, hey, why don't you just come in and, you get a sandwich with us. Well, you can sit with us. We'll bring you to the front door, all that stuff. And when the homeless guy went inside, the McDonald's employees, it's just doing their job. But, hey, you can't be in here. You can't be in here. You're homeless. And Jesse goes, no, hey, he's with me. He's with me. And so Jesse said, go ahead, man, get whatever you want. So he ordered for him and the kids and for this homeless guy. And, the homeless guy, he went, they ate their food, and they finished, and they were walking out of it. And Jesse was saying, hey, you know what? He said, my grandchildren, they were asking me about, why do you do this, Grandpa? Why would you help them out? Why would you do this? And Jesse says, you know how powerful that is? You know the ripple effect and the impact I just made upon their life by showing this person who the rest of society basically disregards. He says, you know what, I brought this guy. He said, this is a valued human being. This is somebody that we respect and we value. And you know what, we're going to be generous. He didn't do anything for us, but we're going to be generous and we're going to help him out. You know what that did for his grandchildren? That's a powerful effect. There's a lesson being taught there, not just stating principles, but living out principles. Hey, don't just teach your children don't just teach them principles on generosity, live out generosity. There's a powerful effect when you say, hey, people, a lot of people have value in this, but when you really treat people and say, no, a lot of people have value. Now let me show you by the way that I live that I value people and they're made in the image of Almighty God. Say, hey, we do things with integrity. In our household growing up, we learned we do things with integrity, not because we're simply Joes, but because we're men of God. We do things with integrity. And so when we lie, when we do something wrong, and we cheat, we steal, we go back to the party that we offended and we get things right. What is that teaching a child? What is that teaching the people around you? That you don't just talk about principles, you live them out. See, the good things that we do have such a profound impact upon the people that are around us, but as well, just as much as the good things have an impact, a ripple effect upon everyone around us, so as well do the bad things. Achan's sin affected everybody that was around him. The good things ripple and affect, just like the bad things ripple and affect. You wonder maybe, just maybe, the reason your family is going through such a difficult season right now isn't just random coincidence. Maybe it's a ripple effect of your marriage at the top of the family. Maybe, just maybe, the reason you're going through such a financial crisis right now isn't because, this is just the season or this is just what happens or everybody goes through. Maybe, just maybe, some of the financial principles you have are not in alliance with what God teaches, and so you're feeling the consequences of it. Maybe, just maybe, the way that we live affects not only our family, our church, and a country, but affects everybody around us. Culture is a powerful thing. Culture is a powerful thing. Listen to Exodus 25. This is the 10 Commandments. Punishing the children, this is God speaking, punishing the children for the sins of their parents to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me. Like, whoa. Think about that. We don't always think about sin like that. We think about, hey, I sin and it affects me, and I do something bad and I get the consequences for it. But God is saying, no, your sins have an impact generationally. We talk a lot about this at the encounter retreats. We talk about generational sins, about how you wonder why you struggle so much with something in your life. You're like, wow, this is a real stronghold in my life. Almost indefinitely, you could look back at your history and see that your grandparents, your parents struggle with the same exact thing. Why? Because sin has a generational impact. And God says, hey, listen, those who hate me, the sin of their parents they'll be punished. The children will be punished for the sin of their parents to the third and the fourth generation. You're like, wow, that's tough, God. You're blaming the great-great-grandchildren for something the parents did. They're feeling the consequences of the actions of somebody did. But listen to the other half of the verse. But showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. And I punish to the third or fourth, but I show love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commands. Let me finish off the story. Verse 13, go consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourself in preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove them. In the morning, present yourself tribe by tribe, clan by clan, family by family, man by man. Whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. I'm skipping a couple verses right after this. They do all that, clan by clan, family by family, man by man. They find out that it's Achan. Then Joshua said, in the morning, Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Achan replied, it is true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. Finally confesses it all. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent. There it was hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. They took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all of Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robes, the gold bars, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, all that he had, to the village of Achor. Joshua said, why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today. Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan, they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore, that place has been called the Valley of Achor ever since. Seems harsh. Seems harsh. But sin has a devastating, destructive way of itself. Sin is so destructive to our relationship with God and so destructive to everything that we are. And I love that this is really, he gives us a solution in this end part. When we've compromised in a certain area of our life, I love that he ends off with this because there's hope in the end of this. Because he says, before they take on this whole ordeal where God says, hey, you're going to go tribe by tribe, I'm going to show you the man that sinned. He talks about consecrate yourself. And there's power there, because if you feel in a season right now where God's even convicting you during this message and you feel like, God, you're unveiling to me an area of compromise in my heart, then the solution to deal with the compromise is we need to consecrate. If there's an area of your life, financial, relational, any type of area in your life that right now, when you hear the word of God, you're being convicted like, wow, that's an area, God. You're right, I'm compromising. I'm not fully giving you that area. I'm holding back an area from you. There's an area that I'm not letting you into, or I'm doing something in a wrong way. Nobody knows about it, God, but I'm still allowing it to go on. The solution is to consecrate ourselves. Once again, fully give yourself over to God and to his things. If there's an area of compromise, it's not wait till tomorrow. What did they do? Early in the morning, it says. Early in the morning, he didn't delay. Once he heard the word of God speak to him, he took immediate action on the things that he was doing wrong. See, once Achan confessed his sin only after it had been revealed. And the pattern of sin is always the same. He said, I saw, I coveted, I took, I hid. I saw, I coveted, I took, I hid.